The land didn't care. That was the first and hardest truth of the New Mexico territory. It didn't care if you were rich or poor, man or woman, Anglo or Mexicano. It only cared about the sun, the rock, and the wind. And all three were trying to kill Rosa Maria. She was running on foot, or what was left of her feet. The soles of her thin shoes, the ones she'd worn to serve dinner in a house that was never her home, had been shredded to paper-thin leather hours ago. Now, it was just blood and blisters painting the sharp gravel of the high desert. She was a mess of torn calico and dried blood. Her dress, once a respectable gray, was ripped at the shoulder and hem, stained dark where she had fallen against a stretch of prickly pear cactus. A fine wool shawl, the only thing of value she owned, was pulled tight around her shoulders, but not for warmth. It was there to hide the thing beneath it. On her back, just over the left shoulder blade, the wound was still raw. It wasn't a whip mark or a scar from a fall. It was a brand, an intricate, twisted piece of ironwork that had seared her flesh and marked her soul. It ached with every step, a hot, pulsing reminder of why she was running. The wool of the shawl rubbed against it, sending needles of fire down her spine. But she welcomed the pain. It kept her awake. It kept her moving. She tasted copper in her mouth. Her lip was split. Her eye was swelling. But those were old pains, familiar aches from a life lived under the heavy hand of Lawrence Bellamy. The brand was new. The brand was the end. She had been running for 2 days since the fire, keeping the jagged line of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains to her west. Now, she was failing. The sun was a hammer. Thirst wasn't just a dryness in her throat. It was a madness clawing at her mind. She stumbled into a shallow arroyo and lay against the hot rock, the world spinning into a blurry watercolor of red dust and blinding blue sky.
"This is where you die,"
a small voice whispered.
"Here, in the dirt, like an animal."
No. The thought was dull, but it was enough. She pushed herself up. She had to keep moving, not just from him, but from the men he would send. She reached the top of the rise and saw it. Not a town, just a trading post. A low, sod-roofed building squatting by a crossroads. O'Keefe's Supply. Smoke trickled from a chimney. A horse and 2 mules were tied to the hitching rail. Salvation and danger. She watched for an hour as the sun bled toward the horizon. A wagon creaked away. A lone rider headed south. Finally, the post was quiet. Rosa pulled the shawl tighter, covering her face like a rebozo, and walked down the hill. She didn't go to the door. She went to the animals. One mule was old, hip-shot and weary. The other was younger, stronger, still bearing the mark of a Army pack animal. She went for that one, her hands, raw and shaking, worked at the knot. She had grown up with vaqueros. She knew ropes, but her fingers were stupid with thirst and fear. The knot gave. She pulled the mule's head, whispering to it in the Spanish her mother had taught her, the language Bellamy forbade. "Vámonos, amigo, we must go." She tried to mount. Her body screamed. The torn muscles in her leg refused to lift her. She tried again, gritting her teeth, and hauled herself sideways onto its back. She didn't bother with a saddle. Bareback, she kicked the mule's flanks and pointed it toward the mountains. She didn't look back. She was a thief now. It was the first free choice she had made in 3 years. As the mule climbed the rocky trail, her mind drifted, falling back into the memories she was trying to outrun. She was Rosa Maria Sandoval, half Anglo from a father who prospected for silver and found only dust, and half Mexican from a mother who taught her prayers and herbs. When her father died, he left them with nothing but his name, which meant less than nothing in this territory. They were destitute. And then Lawrence Bellamy arrived. He was a cattle baron, a man who owned more land than God, with a voice that boomed like a cannon. He'd come from the East after the war, full of ambition and vinegar, buying up land grants and water rights. He saw Rosa Maria, then just 17, stacking adobe bricks with her mother for a penny a day. He didn't see a person. He saw something exotic, something to be owned. Her mixed blood, her dark hair and her father's green eyes made her a curiosity, a prize. He didn't court her. He negotiated. He called it saving her. He offered her mother a small house, a pension, a life free from breaking her back in the sun, all for Rosa. It wasn't a marriage. It was a purchase. Her mother, seeing no other way, had agreed. Rosa remembered the wedding day. A priest, brought in from Santa Fe, a dress of white lace that felt like a shroud. Bellamy, smelling of whiskey and bay rum, his hand on her waist, his thumb digging into her ribs. "You are Mrs. Bellamy now," he'd said, his voice thick. "You are property of the Double B Ranch. Do not forget it." She never did. He treated her like his finest mare, to be fed, to be groomed, to be shown off at dinners, and to be used in the dark. He demanded she speak only English. He demanded she wear the corsets and heavy dresses his partners from Boston expected. He demanded she be silent, still, and beautiful. But there was a fire in Rosa, the Sandoval fire. She was not built to be still. She argued. She defied him in small ways. She spoke Spanish to the servants. She rode astride, not side saddle. Each defiance earned a new bruise, a split lip, a fall down the stairs. And he would be sorry the next day. In his way, he would bring her a gift, a pearl necklace, a silk ribbon, tokens to placate his prized possession. The brand was different. That came last week. She'd found him in his study with one of the serving girls, a young Apache woman. Rosa hadn't screamed. She hadn't cried. She had just turned, walked out, and packed a small bag. He caught her at the stable. He was drunk, his eyes lit with a terrifying, cold rage. It wasn't the rage of a man betrayed. It was the rage of an owner whose property had tried to escape. "You think you can leave me?" he'd roared, dragging her from the horse. "You are mine. Your mother sold you. I bought you. You belong to me, girl. Same as my cattle." That was when the flashback truly hit her. So hard she almost fell from the mule. The smell of the fire. Not the hearth fire, but the forge. He'd dragged her into the blacksmith's shed. His men, the wranglers she had known for 3 years, just watched. They wouldn't meet her eyes. He'd stoked the forge himself. He pulled out the iron. It wasn't his cattle brand, the simple double B. It was something else, a twisted, ornate B, intertwined with what looked like a serpent, something he'd had made, just for her. "Let me go!" she had screamed, the same words she screamed now in her mind. "I will," he'd whispered, his voice terrifyingly calm as his men held her down. "I will let you go right after you learn your lesson, right after you remember who you are." The smell of whiskey on his breath, the hiss of the iron as it met her skin, the pain, a pain beyond all other pain, a white-hot agony that burned away her name, her past, her very soul. She hadn't screamed, she'd just inhaled, a single, sharp gasp. And then the world went black. When she woke, she was in her bed, the wound bandaged. He was gone. She lay there for a day. Then, in the dead of night, she rose. She didn't pack a bag. She didn't take any of the jewels. She took his wedding gift to her, the pearl necklace, and her mother's old shawl. She walked to his room, where he lay passed out from drink. She looked at him for a long time. Then she went to the fireplace, picked up a lit piece of kindling, and dropped it on the foot of his heavy velvet bed curtains. She didn't wait to see the flames catch. She walked out of the house, to the stable, and took her favorite mare. She rode until the horse collapsed, and then she ran. Now, on the stolen mule, she pushed deeper into the mountains. The air grew thin and cold. This was where she would vanish. But Lawrence Bellamy didn't let things go. A week later, Rosa was spotted. She'd gotten careless, desperate for food. She'd tried to cross the new Atchison, Topeka and Santa Fe rail line near a rough-and-tumble grading camp. A foreman saw her, a strange woman, half wild, riding a branded army mule. He didn't think much of it until 2 days later, when the men arrived. They weren't lawmen. They were trackers, hard men with cold eyes and long rifles, led by a man named Silas Croft. They worked for Bellamy. They rode into the camp, flashing money in a piece of paper. It was a warrant, properly signed by a circuit judge in Bellamy's pocket, and it came with a stack of wanted posters. Wanted, Rosa Maria Bellamy for theft and attempted murder. The poster described her as insane and prone to violent fits. It said she had stolen $500 in cash and jewels and set fire to her husband's home in a fit of madness. There was a reward, $100. The railroad foreman took the money they offered for the information. He pointed them toward the high passes. At that very moment, 50 miles north, Elias Ward was at a different trading post, one that served the high country ranchers and the Ute tribes. Elias was a reclusive man, and folks gave him a wide berth. It wasn't just the quiet, watchful way he had, or the fact that he lived alone in a cabin that was more fortress than home. It was the scar, a thick, puckered ruin of flesh that ran from his left temple, across his cheek, and disappeared into his beard. It pulled one eye slightly wider than the other, giving him a look of constant, unsettling surprise. He was at the counter, negotiating prices for flour and coffee beans. When Bellamy's men came in, he recognized their type instantly. Hired guns. They were loud, slapping dust from their chaps, their spurs ringing on the floorboards. "Whiskey, the leader," Croft said to the trader. "And tax. We got paper to post." He unfurled one of the posters and slapped it on the wall. Wanted, Rosa Maria Bellamy. Elias didn't look at first. It wasn't his business. He kept his eyes on his sack of flour. "Some half-breed wife," Croft said, taking the whiskey bottle. "Ran off on Mr. Bellamy, stole a pile of his money and tried to burn him alive in his bed." Another man laughed. "Bellamy's bed is probably the safest place not to be, if you catch my meaning. Heard he's a rough one." "He pays well," Croft snapped. "And he wants her back, alive, if possible. But he ain't particular, just wants her." Elias turned his head, his scarred eye taking in the poster. He read the words, theft, madness, insane. Then he saw the name of the man who signed the warrant, the man offering the reward. Lawrence Bellamy. Elias Ward went still. It was a stillness that was colder than the mountain air. The chatter in the room seemed to fade. He heard the name, and the past came rushing back. Captain Bellamy, the 4th Cavalry, the war, the smell of burning villages, the sound of women screaming, orders given in that same booming voice, orders Elias had followed, orders that had put the scar on his face and a heavier one on his soul. He had thought, hoped, that Bellamy was dead, or at least still back east. To find him here, in New Mexico, running cattle and hunting women, it made Elias's stomach turn. "You know this Bellamy?" the trader asked Elias, trying to make conversation. Elias just looked at him. His voice, when it came, was a low rasp. "I knew a man by that name once, long time ago. He paid for his goods, his movements stiff. He loaded his mule." Not looking at the men, he knew these mountains better than anyone. He knew where a person on the run would go. They'd head for water. They'd head for the high passes, trying to get to Colorado. And he knew where Croft and his men would go. They'd take the low trail, the easy way. Elias didn't make a decision. He just acted. He mounted his horse and cut east, straight up the rocky flank of the mountain, taking a shortcut only he knew. He wasn't looking for the woman. He was looking to see if the hunters would foul his land. He found her 3 days later, or what was left of her. She had tried to cross the upper fork of the Cimarron River. The water was high with early snowmelt, fast and freezing cold. The mule, wiser than she, had balked. She had pushed it, beaten it, until it plunged in. The current snatched them. The mule, strong as it was, barely made it to the other side, scrambling up the bank. Rosa was washed from its back. She'd been tossed against the rocks, dragged a quarter-mile downstream before she found the strength to claw her way onto a gravel bar. She was soaked to the bone. The temperature up here was already dropping below freezing every night. When Elias found her, she was a crumpled bundle of wet calico against the gray rocks. The stolen mule was standing 20 yards away, shivering. Elias dismounted. He thought she was dead. He nudged her with his boot. A low moan escaped her. He knelt. She was blue. Her lips were cracked. Frostbite was already darkening the tips of her fingers. He saw the bruise on her face, the split lip. He saw the tracks of a hard, desperate run. He put his hand on her shoulder to turn her over, and his fingers brushed the wool shawl. It was frozen stiff. As he moved it, the fabric pulled, and he saw the edge of the wound beneath, raw, festering, the ugly, twisted lines of a brand. His jaw tightened. He knew, with a sickening certainty, who had done it. He was a man who wanted to be left alone. He'd built his life on solitude, on forgetting the world and being forgotten by it. This was the world finding him. This was Lawrence Bellamy, reaching out a long arm from the past. He wrapped her in his bedroll, a rough, calloused movement. He was strong. He lifted her like she weighed nothing and threw her over the saddle of his own horse. He didn't have time for gentle. A blizzard was blowing in from the north. She woke twice on the ride. The first time, just a flicker of consciousness. She saw the snow, the trees, the back of a man in a heavy coat. The second time, he had stopped to adjust her position. Her eyes opened. They were wild with fever and terror. She saw his face, the scarred, ruined cheek, the cold eyes. "No," she whispered, her voice a dry crackle. "No more, please." She tried to struggle, a pathetic, weak flapping of her hands. "Let me go. Just let me die. Please." Elias looked at her. Her green eyes, swimming with delirium, stared into his. He saw the brand again in his mind. He saw Bellamy's face. "Not today," he grunted. He secured her ropes and kept riding. When she woke for the third time, it was to warmth. She was in a room, a small, dark room. The walls were solid-hewn logs. The air smelled of pine, wood smoke, and something savory like stew. She was in a narrow bed, under a pile of heavy buffalo hides. She was dry. She was wearing a man's long wool undershirt. It was rough against her skin, but it was clean. She sat up. Her body ached. Her head spun. But the shivering was gone. The fever felt cooler. She looked at her hands. They were raw, but someone had cleaned them. Someone had put a greasy salve on the frostbite. She felt the pull on her back. She reached behind her. A clean bandage was taped to her shoulder. She was safe. Then she moved her leg. A clink of metal. She looked down. Her ankle was raw, rubbed red. Around it was a cold, iron shackle. A chain ran from it to a thick iron ring bolted into the log wall. The warmth vanished. The air in her lungs turned to ice. She wasn't safe. She wasn't saved. She had been claimed. Again. She scrambled backward on the cot. Pulling at the chain, it held fast. She yanked it, the metal biting into her skin. "No!" The sound was a ripped whisper. "No! No! No!" The brand on her back began to burn. The smell of the forge, the hiss of the iron, the thick voice of Bellamy saying "mine." It all came back. This was just another cage, a different master. She screamed, a high, thin sound of pure animal terror. The door to the room, solid oak, opened. The man from the mountain stood there. He was tall, broad, and filled the doorway. In the low light of the cabin, the scar on his face looked like a fresh wound. He held a tin cup of steaming broth in one hand and a rifle in the other. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Where am I?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "Who are you? Let me go." She pulled the chain again to show him. "Let me out of this." You're in my cabin, he said. His voice was low, gravelly from disuse. High Ridge, you're safe.
Safe?
She let out a wild, bitter laugh.
You call this safe? You call this safe?
She rattled the shackle.
This is a cage.
It's to keep you from running, he said, his eyes never leaving hers.
Of course I'll run. You think I want to be here? Let me go!
He didn't move. He just watched her, his scarred face impassive. You're not a prisoner, woman.
Then what is this?
She shrieked, hysteria rising in her throat.
What do you want from me? Money? I have no money. What do you want?
He took a step into the room, setting the rifle by the door. He held out the cup of broth.
Eat. You're weak.
She slapped it out of his hand. The cup clattered, broth splashing across the wooden floor. He looked at the spill. Then he looked back at her. He didn't get angry. He didn't move. He just watched. His stillness was more terrifying than Bellamy's rage.
I will not let you go,
he said, his voice flat. Not yet.
Why?
She sobbed, pulling her knees to her chest.
Why are you doing this?
For the first time, he looked away. He looked at the locked door, at the rifle, at the floor. Because I know the man who's hunting you, Elias Ward said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. His name is Lawrence Bellamy. I served under him in the war. And I fear him. I fear what he'll do if he finds you. And I fear what he'll do if he finds me with you. He turned, his heavy boots echoing on the floor. So you stay put, he said. You're safer here, shackled, than you are out there, free. He stepped out of the room. He pulled the heavy door shut. She heard the sound of a thick wooden bar sliding into place. She heard the click of a lock.
She was alone, in the dark, chained.
For a moment, there was only silence. Then, the realization of her new prison, of her hopeless, endless capture, broke over her. The brand on her back burned. The shackle on her ankle froze. She threw herself from the bed, the chain pulling her up short. She crawled to the door and slammed her fists against the solid wood. It was useless. It was like hitting a mountain. But she kept hitting it. She beat her raw, bandaged hands against the oak. The tears she had refused to shed in the desert, in Bellamy's house, in the river, finally coming. They were not tears of sadness. They were tears of pure, blinding rage. "Let me go!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "Let me go! Do you hear me? Let me go! Please, God, just let me go!" On the other side of the wall, in the main room of the cabin, Elias Ward stood. He didn't walk away. He leaned his forehead against the rough-hewn logs. His eyes closed. He heard every sob. He felt every blow as if it were landing on his own back. His jaw tightened until his teeth ached. He had locked her in to keep Bellamy out, but as he listened to her desperate, broken cries, he knew he'd just trapped himself right there with her. He was a jailer again, and the guilt was a heavier chain than the one on her ankle. The days in that small, dark room blurred into one long, cold twilight. For the first day, Rosa Maria was a caged animal. She clawed at the door, pulling at the wood until her fingernails split and bled. She used the heavy, three-legged stool as a ram, beating it against the solid oak until her arms gave out. She tested the window, but it was set high, barely a foot square, and covered with a thick, iron grate. Elias Ward left food, a tin plate of jerky and hardtack, slid through a low slot in the door he must have built for his dogs. She left it to freeze. He brought water. She wouldn't drink. On the second day, he came in. She scrambled to the farthest corner, the chain pulling taut, and she bared her teeth like a wolf. She held the broken stool leg as a club. He didn't try to speak. He just came for the bandages. "You're back," he grunted, his voice low. "It's infected. I can smell it."
"Get out!"
she hissed, the words raw in her throat.
"Leave me. I'll die. I don't care. Get out!"
"I ain't letting you die of blood poisoning in my cabin," he said. He moved slow. like he was approaching a wild horse. He wasn't afraid of her club. He was just patient. He grabbed her ankle, the one with the shackle, and held it fast. She kicked and screamed, but it was the weak, frantic struggle of a starving woman. He held her down, his weight pinning her legs, and ripped the old bandage from her back. Rosa screamed, a sound of pure fire and agony as the cloth, stuck to the raw wound, was torn away. He cursed, a low, soft sound. "Damnation, he did this proper." She was sobbing now, her face pressed into the rough cot. He was gentle then. He cleaned the wound with whiskey, his touch surprisingly light for such a calloused hand. The sting was so sharp it made her gasp. He applied a thick, dark salve that smelled of pine tar and herbs, and then a clean dressing. "You'll eat," he said, not a question. "Or I'll hog-tie you and pour broth down your throat. Your choice." He left. She lay there, shaking, the pain on her back a clean, sharp burn instead of the hot, sickly pulse of infection. She hated him for it. She hated him for his gentleness. It was a lie. It was the same lie Bellamy told after a beating. The lie that said, "I own you, and I will care for my property." She still didn't eat. On the third day, Elias Ward changed his tactics. He came in, not with food, but with the key to the shackle. Rosa scrambled back, watching him. He knelt, unlocked the iron, and pulled it from her raw ankle. She froze. She was free. She looked at him, her eyes wide, searching for the trick. Elias stood up and backed slowly toward the door. "Shackles off," he said. "You're still weak, but you ain't stupid. You try to run, you'll die. The door stays barred, but the chain, it's done." He left, and she heard the heavy bars slide back into place. She was alone, unchained, but still in the cage. She rubbed her ankle, the relief so sharp it felt like pain. She looked at the plate of food from that morning, cold beans and a piece of corn pone. She waited until she heard him moving outside, the sound of an axe splitting wood. Then, like a stray dog, she crawled to the plate and ate, cramming the food into her mouth with her shaking, filthy hands. She ate it all, and then she wept. An hour later, he came back. He entered the room without warning. She was on the cot, her back to him. "I need to talk to you," he said. She didn't move. "Woman, I'm trying to explain." He stood in the middle of the room, his big frame seeming to suck all the air out of it. "I ain't your enemy. I'm trying to keep you alive. That man, Bellamy, he's put paper out on you. A warrant. Says you tried to kill him. Says you stole from him." Rosa turned slowly. Her green eyes were flat, dead. "He's got men," Elias pushed on. "Hired guns, not lawmen. They're hunting you. If they find you, they won't bring you to a judge. They'll bring you back to him, and you know what he'll do." Rosa stood up. She was weak. She swayed on her feet, but she stood. She walked toward him, her head held high, the fire returning to her. "And you," she whispered. "What will you do, Elias Ward? Will you save me, keep me here, my own private jailer?" "I'm protecting you," he said, his jaw tightening. She was close now, close enough to see the way the scar pulled at his eye. She looked him up and down, a look of such profound contempt that he took a step back. "Protecting me," she said, the words dripping with venom. "That is what he said. Bellamy. He saved me from poverty. He protected me from the world. And you are just the same. Another man who thinks he has the right." "That ain't fair," Elias said, his voice dropping. "Fair?" She let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "You chain me to a wall. You lock me in a room. You force your medicine and your food on me. You look at me, and you don't see a person. You see what? A stray? A half-breed? Something small and broken you can keep. Something that's less than human." She stepped closer, right up to his chest. She looked up into his scarred face. "You are just another white man," she spat, "who thinks he owns the world and everything in it." And with all the strength she had left, She gathered the saliva in her mouth and spat in his face. It landed on his scarred cheek. It dripped into his beard. Elias Ward went absolutely still. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. The muscle in his jaw jumped. Rosa watched him, her heart hammering, her breath held. She expected the blow. She had seen this rage 100 times in Bellamy. She braced herself for the back of his hand. He did not move for a long time. Then, slowly, he raised a hand, but not to her. He wiped the spittle from his own face. He looked at his hand, then back at her. His eyes were not angry. They were something else. Sad, tired. "Maybe you're right," he said, his voice a low rasp. "But I'm the man keeping you alive, and I ain't Bellamy, 'cause if I was, you'd be bleeding on the floor right now." He turned and left, barring the door behind him. Rosa stood there, her legs shaking, until she collapsed back onto the cot. She had played her last card, and she had lost. A strange truce settled over the cabin. Elias began leaving the door to her room unbarred during the day. He'd sit in the main room, oiling his rifle or mending a harness, the big fireplace crackling. She would stay in the doorway of her room, a shadow in the hall, watching him. 2 wolves in 1 den. She finally ate the hot stew he left for her. It was stringy venison and wild onions, but it was the best thing she had ever tasted. She ate, sitting on the floor, her back against the doorframe. She didn't thank him. He didn't seem to need it. Elias Ward was a man made of silence. He'd lived up here for so long. The only sounds were the wind and his own breathing. Rosa's presence, even her hostile, simmering presence, was a disturbance. But he found, to his surprise, that it was a welcome one. Her anger was loud. It was alive. He had been alone with ghosts for 10 years. Her fury was solid. It was real. Then the snow came. It started as a light dusting. Elias looked out the window, his scarred face grim. "It's early," he said, to himself more than to her. By nightfall, it was a howling blizzard. The wind shrieked like a banshee, rattling the shutters. The snow didn't fall. It flew sideways, a solid wall of white that erased the world. For 3 days, they were locked in the cabin, the snow piling up against the doors, blotting out the windows. The world shrank to the 4 walls of that room. The trail was buried. The passes were impassable. Elias was trapped with her. And the arguments began. They were small, stupid fights. Fights born of 2 people pacing a cage. "You're burning the wood too fast," she'd snap. "It's my wood," he'd grunt. "You snore like a bear. You talk in your sleep, in Spanish. Woke me up." "I do not." "You do? Cursing mostly." They circled each other, day after day. The tension was a living thing in the cabin. She was healing. Her strength was returning. The brand on her back was a puckered, angry scar now, but it no longer burned. Her frostbite was healing, and with her strength, her desperation grew. The storm broke. After a week of gray skies, the sun came out, blindingly bright on the fresh, deep snow. Elias pulled on his heavy coat. "Barn," he muttered. "Checking the stock. Don't do nothing stupid. There's nowhere to go." Rosa watched him go. She waited. She counted to 100. Then she pulled on his spare coat, a heavy buffalo hide thing that swallowed her, grabbed a heel of bread, and slipped out the door. The cold hit her like a hammer. The air was thin and sharp. The world was a perfect, terrible white. The snow was up to her waist, but she saw the tree line, maybe a mile distant. Freedom. She began to run, or rather, to plunge through the drifts. It was like running in thick mud. Every step was a battle. She fell, got up, fell again. She was sobbing, the cold air burning her lungs. "Rosa." His voice was a roar. She looked back. He was coming out of the barn, his face a mask of fury. That made her run faster. She scrambled, panicked, not looking where she was going. She was just running away. She heard him gaining on her, his long legs eating up the snow. She aimed for a slight dip, thinking it was a shortcut. It wasn't a dip, it was the edge of a ravine. The snow shelf, unpacked and fresh, gave way under her. She didn't scream, she just fell, a silent, sickening drop. She landed, not on rocks, but in a massive drift. The snow was soft, impossibly deep. It swallowed her. She was buried, the snow packing in around her, heavy and cold. She was stuck. She heard him at the edge, cursing.
"You damned fool!"
he yelled, his voice echoing in the clear air.
"You idiot woman!
Are you trying to kill yourself?" She couldn't answer. She was gasping, the snow melting on her face.
"Stay put!" he roared.
He was gone for an eternity. 10 minutes. He came back with a long coil of rope. He tied one end to a thick pine and tossed the other down to her. It landed by her head.
"Grab it!"
he shouted. She just looked at it. Her pride, the last thing she owned, refused. She would rather freeze here than be pulled out by him.
"Damn you! Rosa, take the rope!"
he screamed, his voice raw. "Take the rope or I swear to God I will leave you here. Is this what you want? To die in a hole? Is this better than Bellamy?" His words hit her. She looked at the white walls of her snowy grave. It was just another cage. She grabbed the rope. He hauled her up, his muscles straining. He pulled her over the edge. She lay on the snow, gasping, soaked and freezing. He didn't help her up. He grabbed her by the arm, yanked her to her feet, and dragged her back to the cabin. He was cursing the whole time. Cursing her, cursing Bellamy, cursing the snow, cursing God. He threw her inside, the buffalo coat falling from her shoulders.
"There," he roared, pointing a finger at her. "Was that worth it? You happy? There is nothing out there. Nothing but 6 feet of snow and death. Bellamy ain't out there. Your husband ain't out there. Just God. And he ain't friendly. Now you sit by that fire before you lose your feet."
He slammed the door and went back to the barn. That night, the anger was gone. It had been burned out of them, frozen out. All that was left was a deep, exhausted quiet. Rosa sat by the hearth, wrapped in a dry blanket, her clothes steaming on a rack nearby. She was sullen, defeated. Elias came in, his own work done. He was limping. The drag through the snow had agitated an old wound. He sat on his stool, his back to her, and let out a long, pained sigh. He unbuttoned his wool shirt and pulled it off, wincing. Rosa watched him. In the flickering firelight, she saw it. His back. The scar on his face was terrible. The scars on his back were a history. They were not like her brand. They were old, silvery lines, puckered, round hollows where bullets had gone in. Long, thick ridges from a blade. It was a map of pain. She stood up, the blanket pooled at her feet. She moved slowly, drawn by a curiosity that was stronger than her fear. She reached out a trembling hand, and she touched one of the scars, the one that looked like a star. Elias flinched as if she'd put a hot coal to his skin. He twisted away, pulling his shirt back on, his face dark. "Don't."
"Who did that to you?"
she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "The war." He bit off. "Bellamy?" He went still. He looked at her, then into the fire. "No, not him, not directly." He sat back down, but he didn't put the shirt all the way on. He just stared at the flames. The blizzard had picked up again, the wind moaning around the eaves. It was a night for confessions. "I told you I served under him," Elias said, his voice quiet. "He was Captain Lawrence Bellamy, 4th Cavalry. He liked the power. He believed in the Union, or said he did, but mostly he believed in burning things." He picked up a poker and jabbed at the fire. "We were south, near the border, hunting Apache raiders. We found a village, adobe huts, goats, a few patches of corn." He paused, his eyes lost in the flames. "They wasn't raiders,
just farmers, old men, women, children. But Bellamy, he gave the order. Clear it. He said they were collaborators. Said they'd fed the raiders, given them comfort. He looked at Rosa, his scarred eyes seeming to see right through her. They looked like your people. Your mother's people. I argued. I said they were civilians. He put his pistol to my head. He called me a half-breed lover. My own mother was Ute. Rosa gasped. I followed the order, he whispered, the shame of 10 years in that one word. We all did. We cleared it. We shot the livestock. We burned the homes. And the people who fought back. His voice broke, just for a second. A boy came at me. Couldn't have been more than 12. Had a little carving knife. I shot him. I didn't even think. I shot him. And his mother came out of the hut, screaming. She had dark hair and green eyes, just like yours. He dropped the poker. It clattered on the stone. That's when I quit. He said, that's when I got this. He touched the scar on his face. Her, the boy's father. He came at me with a saber. I took a bullet in the side that same afternoon, and I just kept walking. Deserted. Rode north until my horse died. Then I walked. They think I'm dead. I built this place. Been here 10 years, trying to wash it off. But it don't wash. He finally looked at her. So, when I saw his name on that poster, and then I saw you, by that river branded, I couldn't let him have you. I couldn't let him win again. The cabin was silent, save for the wind. Rosa sank to the floor. He wasn't her jailer. He was a prisoner, too, chained to a ghost, just like her. He branded me, she said, her voice so soft he barely heard it. I saw the wound. He said, no, she said, shaking her head. You saw a wound. You didn't see the brand. His men held me down, in the forge. He did it himself, with a special iron he'd had made. He said I was property. His property, like his cattle. He said if I ever ran again, everyone who saw me would know who I belonged to. Elias closed his eyes, his hand clenching on his knee. He did it because I tried to leave, she continued, the words spilling out now. Unstoppable. He hurt me, in other ways, for 3 years, but the brand that was different, that was to mark my soul, to say I wasn't human. She looked at her own hands, twisting them in her lap. So I ran, but not just I set a fire, in his room, while he was sleeping. Elias's eyes snapped open. He was drunk, she whispered. Passed out. I took a piece of lit kindling from the hearth, and I dropped it on the curtains of his bed. I wanted to kill him. I wanted to burn the whole house to the ground. With me in it. I just wanted it all to end. She looked up, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I'm the monster. Elias, not just him. That poster, it says, attempted murder. It's true. I did it. I tried to kill him. She waited for the judgment. The disgust, the horror. This was the moment he would turn her out. Elias looked at her, at this small, fierce, broken woman who had just confessed to attempted murder. He'd seen murderers. He'd been one. He didn't even pause. He just nodded, his voice rough with an emotion she couldn't name. Good, he said. I'd have done the same. Only I'd have used a bullet, and I'd have made sure he was awake to see it. Rosa stared at him. She had expected anything but this, not condemnation, not pity, but absolution, understanding. He believed her. He believed her. That single, simple fact shattered the ice that had encased her heart for 3 years, the anger that kept her sane, the rage that kept her alive, the pride that kept her defiant. It all broke. A sound ripped from her throat, a ragged, torn sound that was half sob, half scream, the tears she had refused to shed for the brand, for the beatings, for her mother, for her stolen life they came. She collapsed in on herself, curling into a ball on the hearth rug, her body shaking apart. Elias, the man who had not shown kindness or comfort in a decade, looked at the weeping woman at his feet. He was terrified,
But he moved. He slid off the stool and sat on the floor beside her. He was stiff, awkward. He didn't know what to do, so he put his hand on her back. A big, heavy, calloused, warm hand, right between her shoulders. She flinched at the touch, a violent, full-body shudder. And then she leaned into it. It was the first human touch she had felt in 3 years that was not violent, or cold, or demanding. It was just there, solid. She turned, her control completely gone, and buried her face in his rough wool undershirt. She grabbed his shirt in her fists and she cried. She cried for the girl she had been, for the woman she had become. Elias was stiff, a man holding lightning in a bottle, but he held her. His other arm came up, awkward, and settled around her, pulling her close. He didn't shush her. He didn't pat her. He just held on, his own eyes closed, listening to the sound of a soul breaking. She wasn't crying because she was afraid. She was crying because, for the first time in forever, she was not alone. That night of confession changed the air in the cabin. It was not a magical fix. There was no sudden comfort, no easy smiles. Instead, the air, which had been stretched thin and tight as a drumhead, finally went slack. The silence that fell between them was no longer a weapon. It was just quiet. Rosa Maria still slept in the small, dark room, but she no longer barred the door. Elias still slept on his cot by the hearth, but he slept. He stopped keeping one ear open for the sound of her trying to bolt. The first real thaw came a week later. The snow, which had been a solid 6-foot wall of white, began to sweat. Icicles as long as a man's arm hung from the eaves, dripping a steady rhythm onto the muddy ground below. The world smelled of wet pine and damp earth. Elias pulled on his coat. "Gotta check the herd," he grunted, not looking at her. "See if the cougar got any more, or if the thaws uncovered the feed." He paused at the door, his hand on the latch. You can stay, or you can come, but you'll need boots." Rosa looked up from the fireplace, where she'd been scrubbing his soot-blackened kettle. She was shocked. He was giving her a choice, and he was letting her outside. She nodded, her heart giving a strange, painful kick. "I will come." He dug out a pair of old boots, worn but sturdy, and stuffed them with rags to fit her small feet. He saddled his own horse, a tall roan, and the mule she had stolen. She looked at the mule, her face tightening with the memory of that desperate flight. Elias just handed her the reins. "His name's Jed. He's army stock, stubborn, but he won't fall." He mounted up, expecting to have to give her a hand, or to see her struggle. Rosa just gathered the reins, her hands moving with a fluid, forgotten grace. She checked the cinch, finding it a little loose, and gave the strap a sharp, professional yank, tightening it with her knee. She put her foot in the stirrup and swung herself up into the saddle in one smooth motion. She didn't mount like a lady. Side saddle, she mounted like a man, like a vaquero. Elias just watched, his scarred face betraying nothing, but his one good eye had a flicker of surprise. They rode out. The world was blindingly white and blue. The snow was still deep in the drifts, but on the sun-facing slopes, patches of brown grass were appearing. Rosa breathed in the cold, clean air. It was the first time she had tasted freedom in months. It was so sharp, it almost made her dizzy. They found his small herd of cattle huddled in a box canyon, sheltered from the wind. They were thin, hungry, but alive.
"Got to push 'em,"
Elias said. "Get him down to the lower pasture where the grass is showing." He uncoiled his rope, readying for the hard work of chasing half-wild cattle through deep snow. "Wait," Rosa said. He turned. She was looking at the herd, her eyes sharp. "The red one, the calf. Its mother is spooked. If you ride in with the rope, she'll bolt. She'll take the whole herd up the ridge, not down." "And what do you suggest?" he asked, not unkindly. "I will go," she said. She slipped off the mule. "You stay here, on the horse. Let them see you. You are the threat. I am not. She began to walk, not at the herd, but in a wide, slow circle. She didn't look at them. She kept her head down. She was humming a low, soft Spanish lullaby her mother used to sing. The cattle watched her, their ears twitching. The led cow, the mother of the red calf, snorted. Rosa just kept walking, her movements slow, unthreatening. She moved to the high side of the canyon, getting behind them. She never hurried. She just applied pressure, a ghost in the snow. The lead cow turned. Rosa stopped. The cow looked at Elias, then at Rosa. Rosa took one more step. The cow huffed, gathered her calf, and began to move. Not up the ridge, but down, toward the open pasture. The rest of the herd, trusting the led cow, followed. In 10 minutes, the entire herd was moving, slowly and calmly, right where Elias wanted them. Rosa walked back and mounted Jed. Elias just sat on his roan, coiling his rope. He had been ready for a 4-hour fight. She had done it in 10 minutes, without raising her voice. My family, she said, looking at her hands on the reins. They were vaqueros, from Chihuahua, before my father. I grew up with cattle. I know them. Elias nodded, a slow, deep nod of respect. You do, he said. You surely do. For the first time, he saw the person she was, not the victim he had found. He saw Rosa Maria Sandoval, and she was capable. The wall between them didn't just melt, it cracked. In the weeks that followed, the work became their language. He stopped treating her like a prisoner or a patient. He treated her like a partner. One afternoon, he came out of the cabin holding his old Army-issue rifle, a heavy .50 caliber Sharps. That cougar's still out there, he said. I found tracks. You're going to learn this. I have never shot a gun, Rosa said, her hands flying to her stomach. Bellamy had kept his guns locked. He said they were not for delicate women. Nothing to it, Elias said, his voice flat. Just pointing and pulling. But you gotta know it. I ain't always gonna be here. You gotta be able to protect yourself. He took her out to the fence line and set up an old tin can on a post. He showed her how to load the heavy brass cartridge, how to pull the hammer back, how to brace the stock against her shoulder. It'll kick, he warned. Don't fight it. Let it come. He stood behind her. She was small, and the rifle was a cannon. He put his hand on her shoulder to steady her. She flinched. He pulled his hand back fast, as if burned. Sorry. No, she said, her voice tight. It's all right. I am not used to... I know, he said. He didn't touch her again. Go on, aim small. She raised the rifle. It was so heavy. She tried to hold it steady, but it wavered. She closed her eyes and pulled the trigger. The explosion was deafening. The rifle stock slammed into her shoulder, knocking her back a step. The shot went wild, kicking up dirt 10 feet to the left of the can. Again, was all he said. She loaded, she shot, again. A miss. Her shoulder was on fire. She was angry. You're closing your eyes, he said. You're scared of the kick. Look at the can, only the can. Squeeze the trigger. Rosa, don't pull it. She loaded again. She glared at the can. She put it in her sights. She let out a breath, and she squeezed. The rifle bucked. The can vanished. A sharp ping echoed across the valley. She stood there, stunned. Elias walked past her, picked up the can, and looked at the clean hole through the middle. He walked back and handed it to her. A slow smile spread across Rosa's face. It was the first real smile he had ever seen from her. It lit her from the inside, chasing the shadows from her green eyes. It was beautiful. Elias felt his heart do that strange, painful kick again. He cleared his throat. It'll do, he grunted, turning away to hide the flush on his scarred face. We'll practice every day. The snow melted. The high pasture turned green. The wall between them was all but gone. One night, they sat by the fire, exhausted. They had spent the entire day rebuilding a section of fence that had been crushed by the snow. Her hands were raw, blistered. His bad leg was aching. Elias reached under his cot and pulled out a clay jug.
"What is that?"
she asked, rubbing her hands. "Trouble," he said. He pulled the cork. "Corn liquor, my own make. It's rough, but it's good for aches." He poured a small measure into 2 tin cups. He handed one to her. She hesitated, the memory of Bellamy's whiskey breath flashing in her mind. "I ain't him," Elias said softly, reading her thoughts. "It's just a drink, for the work." She took the cup. She sniffed it. It smelled like fire and corn. She took a sip. It was awful. It burned all the way down, made her eyes water, and then a strange, liquid warmth spread through her chest. It felt good. She took another drink. He drank his, he poured another. They drank. They didn't talk, but the silence was full. They were 2 people, sitting by a fire, sharing a drink at the end of a hard day. It was normal. Rosa started to feel light. The aches in her hands faded. She looked at Elias. He was staring into the fire. His scarred face relaxed in the warm light. He wasn't a monster. He wasn't a jailer. He was just Elias, a man with his own ghosts, a man who had seen her brand and had not turned away. She felt a rush of something she couldn't name. It was gratitude. It was something more. She laughed, a small, rusty sound. He looked at her. "What?" "I hit the can," she said, feeling foolish. "You did," he said, a small smile touching his own lips. "You're a good teacher. You're a good shot." They looked at each other. The fire crackled. The moonshine hummed in their veins. He was so solid. He was the opposite of Bellamy. Bellamy was all noise and polish and cold hands. Elias was silence and scars and warmth. He leaned in. It was a slow movement. He was giving her every chance to say no, to pull away. She didn't. Her eyes fluttered closed. His lips touched hers. It was not a gentle kiss. It was rough. His beard was scratchy. His lips were chapped from the wind. It tasted of moonshine and wood smoke. It was a kiss of loneliness, a kiss of 2 people who had forgotten what it felt like to be touched. She kissed him back, her hand coming up to touch his rough shirt. There was a desperate, hungry fire in it, a need. And then, just as quickly, the fire died. Shame, cold and sharp, cut through the whiskey warmth. What was she doing? She was marked. She was ruined. She was Bellamy's property, branded and broken. She was a woman who had tried to murder her husband. She was nothing. And this man, he was kind. He was quiet. He was good. He deserved better. He didn't deserve to be touched by someone as dirty as her. She shoved him, hard, breaking the kiss. She scrambled backward, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. "No," she whispered, her voice choked. "No, I can't." Elias stared at her, his face a mask of confusion and hurt. "Rosa, what's wrong?" I cannot." She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "You don't know what I am. I don't deserve kindness. I don't deserve this." She was thinking of the brand. She was thinking of the fire. "Rosa, it was just a kiss," he said, his voice rough. "No," she cried. "It wasn't. It was your kind to me. And I am filth." She jumped to her feet and fled to her room. She slammed the door and, for the first time in weeks, she dropped the bar. She sank to the floor, her back against the wood, and sobbed. She had ruined it. She had ruined the only safe place she had ever known. Elias sat by the fire, stunned. He raised his hand to his lips. He could still feel her. He didn't understand. He just didn't understand. The next day was a frozen, terrible silence. Rosa wouldn't come out of her room. Elias sat by the door, his head in his hands. "Rosa," he said, his voice low. I'm sorry. I won't touch you again. I swear it. Just come out. You gotta eat. He heard nothing. Rosa, please. Finally, he gave up. He was filled with a self-loathing he hadn't felt since the war. He had pushed her. He was just like all the others, a man who took what he wanted. I got to ride out, he said to the closed door. Fence is down on the north pasture. I'll be back by dark. Bar the main door behind me. Please. He waited. He heard her slide the bar on her own door. Then the heavy thud of the main bar falling into place after he stepped out. He rode off, his heart heavy as stone. Inside the cabin, Rosa was alone. The silence was deafening. She was shaking. She felt poisoned by her past, by her own weakness. She had to get busy. She had to clean. She had to scrub the feeling away. She swept the floor. She aired out the blankets. She was restless, frantic. She went to the small, rickety desk where Elias kept his few papers. It was dusty. She wiped it down. She opened the drawer to clean inside. She saw them, a stack of old Army discharge papers, a small leather-bound ledger, and a piece of folded paper tucked underneath. She knew she shouldn't. It was his private. But her hands were moving on their own. She pulled it out. She unfolded it. Her world stopped. She was looking at her own face, or a bad drawing of it. Wanted, Rosa Maria Bellamy, for theft and attempted murder. She read the words. Insane, prone to violent fits, dangerous. And then, at the bottom, she saw the number. Reward, $100. The blood drained from her face. The air left her lungs. She gripped the edge of the desk. $100. It was all a lie. The rescue, the locked room, the slow, patient kindness, the bandages, the shooting lessons, the kiss. It wasn't protection. It was an investment. He was just waiting. Waiting for the snow to clear. Waiting for her to be healthy enough to travel. He was keeping his property safe. His reward money. The kiss. Oh, God, the kiss. That was the worst part. He had done that to what? To gentle her? To make her trust him before he sold her? The shame from last night vanished, replaced by a rage so pure and cold it stopped her tears. She was a fool, a twice-damned fool. She had run from one master, only to fall into the arms of another. A quieter master, a more patient one, but a master all the same. She was still standing there, the poster clutched in her hand, when the door opened. Elias came in, shaking the rain from his coat. The thaw had turned to a cold spring storm. He looked tired. Damn cougar's back. Didn't get him. But Rosa. He saw her face. He saw the poster in her hand. His face went gray. Rosa, that it ain't let me explain. Explain? Her voice was not a scream. It was dead. Quiet. More dangerous than any shout. Explain the $100, or explain the part where you're a liar? No, he said, taking a step toward her. I kept it. I took it off the wall at the trading post, so no one else would see it, to know what they were looking for. To know what your prize was worth, she spat. All this time, chained, locked in. You're safer here, Rosa. I'm protecting you, Rosa. You were protecting your money. That ain't true, he roared, his own patience snapping. The kiss, she screamed, the word ripping out of her. Was that part of it, too? Was that to make the calf gentle before the slaughter? Stop it, he yelled. That's not what it was. Liar, you're just like him, just another man who wants to own me. She couldn't breathe. The walls were closing in. She had to get out. She threw the poster in his face and bolted for the door. He was faster. He saw the wild, desperate look in her eyes. She wasn't running to anywhere. She was just running. Into the storm. Into the mountains where the cougar was. She would die. No. He lunged and grabbed her arm. It was the one thing he should not have done. The second his fingers closed around her arm, she broke. The past and the present slammed together. It was Bellamy's hand. It was the wrangler's hand. It was the hand of the master. She screamed, a raw, piercing sound of pure animal terror.
Let me go.
She fought him, not like a person, like a trapped animal. She clawed at his face, her nails digging for his eyes. She kicked, beat his chest with her free hand.
Let me go, damn you! You're just like him! You're him!
He was stronger. He couldn't let her go. He reacted. He grabbed her other arm. He trapped her, pinning her arms, pushing her back against the solid log wall. His body pressed her into the wood. She was trapped, completely. The fight vanished, just evaporated. She went utterly still. Her head fell back against the wall. She stopped screaming. She just froze. Tears streamed from her wide, terrified eyes. She was looking at his chin, not his face. She was waiting for the blow. Elias stared at her, his chest heaving. His face was inches from hers. He saw the raw terror in her eyes. She wasn't seeing him. She was seeing Bellamy. She was seeing the forge. And he was the one who had put that look there. His arms were pinning her. He was holding her captive. He was him. The realization hit him like a physical blow.
Oh, God,
he whispered. He was shaking. His hands, which were pinning her, were trembling.
Look at me,
he commanded, his voice a raw rasp.
She wouldn't.
Rosa, look at me. Her eyes slowly, fearfully, lifted to his.
I ain't ever gonna be that man,
he whispered, his voice cracking. I ain't him. Do you hear me? I will never be him. I'd rather die than be him. He was breathing hard, his heart cracking in two. But I ain't letting you die either, he said, his voice broken. I ain't letting you run out there and get killed by the storm, or by him. I can't. He slowly, so slowly, released his grip on her arms. She didn't move. She was still pinned, just by her own fear. He let her go. Rosa's legs gave out. She slid down the log wall and crumpled onto the floor in a heap. She buried her face in her knees and began to sob. Not the angry sobs of before. These were the hopeless, broken sounds of a person who had given up. Elias backed away. He looked at his own hands, horrified. He had done this. He had tried to save her from her past, and he had just dragged her right back into it. He looked at her, a broken heap on his floor. He couldn't fix it. He couldn't say the words. His heart breaking. He turned, he grabbed his wet coat, stepped out into the freezing rain, and walked away from the cabin, leaving the door wide open behind him. Rosa cried until she was empty. The cold rain began to blow into the cabin, misting her face. He was gone. He'd left. But the door was open. He hadn't barred her in. He hadn't taken her to her room. He hadn't locked her up. He had left. She sat there for a long time, the cold seeping into her bones. Where had he gone? The storm was getting worse. The cougar. She stood up, her legs shaking. She pulled on her own coat. She didn't know what she had to do. She walked out into the rain. Elias. The yard was empty. The barn was dark. She saw him. He was at the far end of the corral, by the fence line, just standing in the downpour. He was soaked, his back to her. He was just standing, staring at the mountains. He was holding something in his hands, a dark, wet piece of cloth. She walked toward him, her new boots sucking at the mud. The rain plastered her hair to her face. As she got closer, she saw what he was holding. It was her shawl. The fine wool shawl her mother had given her, the one she had worn to cover the brand, the one she had tossed into the corner of her room, unable to touch it, unable to throw it away. He was holding it, his big hands running over the wet wool. He hadn't heard her approach over the wind. He was talking to himself, or to the shawl. "Marked," he whispered, his voice so low she almost didn't hear it. He marked you. Damn him. Damn his soul to hell. He ran his thumb over the fabric, right over the spot where her brand would be. He wasn't holding the poster, the paper that said she was a criminal worth $100. He was holding this, the cloth that held the proof of her pain. He looked up at the dark, stormy mountains, his scarred face a mask of old grief.
"You ain't marked to me,"
he whispered, the words ripped from his gut.
"You ain't marked, not to me."
Rosa stopped, 10 feet behind him. She stood in the freezing rain, her heart, which she had thought was a dead, cold stone, beginning to beat again. A slow, painful, powerful rhythm. He didn't see a reward. He didn't see a criminal. He saw her, and he hated the mark. He hated it as much as she did. She just stood there, the rain washing the tears from her face, and watched him. He stood there, a man of stone, with the rain running in rivers from his hat. He heard her, but he couldn't turn. He heard the mud suck at her boots as she stopped. He was so ashamed. He wished the ground would open and take him. He had done the one thing he swore he would never do. He had used his strength against her. "Elias." Her voice was quiet, not angry, not afraid, just quiet. He slowly turned. His face, in the gray light, was a roadmap of his own private hell. He let the shawl, her shawl, fall from his hands into the mud. "You should go inside," he said, his voice a low rasp. "You're freezing. The fire's out." "So are you," she said. She didn't move. She just watched him. He looked at the wet, crumpled poster he had thrown on the floor of the cabin hours ago. I swear to you, Rosa, I wasn't that money." "I know," she said. He stopped. He'd been ready for another fight, for more screaming. He wasn't ready for that. "What?" "I know," she said again, pulling her thin, wet coat tighter. I heard what you said. About the mark. That I wasn't marked. Not to you." He couldn't look at her. He looked at the ground, at the shawl he had dropped. "I grabbed you. I pinned you to the wall. I scared you. Rosa, I was him." She took a step closer. He flinched. "No," she said, her voice firm. "You weren't. I thought you were. For a second, I thought you were, but you're not." How can you say that?" he choked out. You looked at me. I saw your face." "He never let go," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Bellamy, when he had me, he never let go. Not until he was done. You let go. Elias, you stopped, and you opened the door. He always locked the door." He looked at her then, really looked at her. Her short, chopped hair was plastered to her face. Her eyes were red from crying. She was shaking from the cold, but she was standing there, in the rain, looking at him, and she was not afraid.
"We are fools,"
he said, his voice thick.
"Standing here in this, come on."
He didn't grab her arm. He just turned and walked toward the cabin. He held the door open for her. She walked past him. Inside, he came in and barred the door, not to keep her in, but to keep the storm out. The cabin was cold, dark. The poster, the one she had found, was a soggy, crumpled ball by the hearth. Elias walked over to it. He picked it up. He didn't look at it. He just held it. He looked at Rosa. 10 years, he said, his voice hollow. I've been running from that part of myself, the part that followed his orders, the part that hurt people. When I saw you, hurt, I thought maybe I could do one thing right, pay one debt back. And tonight I almost... He didn't finish. He turned, and with a violent grunt, he threw the poster into the cold, black fireplace. That's what I think of him, and his money. Rosa watched it land among the ashes. She believed him. Without a word, he knelt. He began to build the fire, his hands shaking, his movements stiff. She went to her room, stripped off her wet clothes, and put on the dry wool shirt and trousers he had given her. She came back out. He was still kneeling by the fire, his own wet coat steaming, his head bowed. She got a dry blanket and walked up behind him. She hesitated. Then she draped it over his broad, shaking shoulders. He froze. Then he reached up, his hand covering hers where it rested on his shoulder. He just held it for a long, long moment. The days that followed were a fragile peace. They were shy, like two strangers who had seen each other's darkest secrets and were now learning how to say good morning. The fight, the poster, the kiss, it was all there, in the air between them. But the work returned. The spring thaw was in full force. The fences needed mending. The cattle needed moving. The garden needed to be tilled. The work was their truce. He taught her how to set snares for rabbits. She taught him how to find the wild onions and mustard greens that grew on the ridge. He no longer treated her as a guest or a prisoner. He treated her as a partner. When he spoke, it was, "We need to," not, "I need to." He never touched her. He was so careful. He would move 6 feet out of his way to not brush against her in the narrow cabin. He was terrified of being that man again. And Rosa, she watched him. She saw the gentleness in his hands as he reset a chick's broken leg. She saw the patience as he mended a stubborn piece of harness. She saw him look at her, and then look away, his face tight with a longing he refused to act on. And she realized he was the one who was afraid now. He was afraid of himself. A week after the storm, they were in the barn. The air was warm, smelling of sun-baked hay and old leather. They were mending tack. The silence was comfortable, broken only by the snort of the horses and the squeak of leather. Rosa was fumbling with a buckle. Her hands, still raw from the work, were clumsy. "Damn this," she muttered, dropping it for the 3rd time. Elias looked over. He put down his awl and came to her. "Here," he said, his voice low. You gotta twist the leather against the grain. Like this." He knelt beside her. He reached out to take the strap. His knuckles, rough and scarred, brushed the back of her hand. She flinched, a tiny, involuntary movement. He pulled his hand back like he'd been shot. I'm sorry, No," she said, cutting him off. "Elias, it wasn't you." She looked at her own hand. "It's just habit." He stayed where he was, kneeling, looking at her, his face full of a sad, quiet pain. I won't touch you again. Rosa, if you don't want, I swear it." She looked at him, this big, scarred, quiet man. This man who had faced down her terror, and then his own. This man who thought he was the monster. "What if I do?" she whispered. His head snapped up. His scarred eye went wide. "What?" "What if I want?" she said. She was trembling. This was harder than facing down Bellamy. This was harder than cutting her hair. She reached out a shaky hand. She didn't touch his hand. She touched his face. She laid her fingers, gently, on the ruined scar tissue of his cheek. He closed his eyes. A shudder went through him. He hadn't been touched with simple, plain kindness, and he couldn't remember. "Elias," she whispered. He leaned in, slowly, his heart hammering so hard he thought it would break his ribs. But he stopped, an inch from her. He wouldn't make that mistake again. He would not be the one who took. He left the last inch. He left the choice. Rosa looked at his lips, chapped and rough. She looked into his one good eye, which was full of terror and hope. She leaned in that last inch. She kissed him. It was not the desperate, whiskey-soaked kiss from before. It was soft. It was hesitant. It was a question and a statement. It tasted of salt and leather and a forgiveness that was so deep it ached. She pulled back, her forehead resting against his. "Rosa," he whispered, his voice thick. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know what this meant. I can't be what he was. I don't know how to be." "Good," she said, her own voice shaky. I don't want that." She pulled back so she could see him. "I'm not ready for forever. Elias," she said, the words spilling out. "I don't even know what that word means. I might still be broken. I might still be marked. In In my head."
"You ain't broken," he said, his voice fierce.
"But I'm ready to try," she finished, a small, terrified smile on her face. To not be afraid. To be here. With you. I am ready to try." He looked at her, at this impossible, brave woman. He couldn't speak, so he took her hand, the one that had been fumbling with the buckle. He turned it over, and he kissed the calloused, dirty palm. He closed her fingers over the kiss, as if to hold it safe. That night, the cabin was quiet. The fire crackled, casting low, warm shadows. They had eaten dinner, the silence between them no longer awkward, but charged. It was humming. Rosa rose from the table, took her plate, and washed it. Elias watched her. He expected her to go to her room, to bar the door. It was their routine. She dried her hands, and she turned. She did not go to her room. She stood in the middle of the floor, in the firelight. She just looked at him. Elias stood up, his heart in his throat. "Rosa." She didn't speak. She walked to him. She took his big, rough hand. She didn't lead him to her room, the small, dark room that had been her cage. She led him to his own cot, the one by the hearth, the one in the open. She sat on the edge of it and pulled him down beside her. They were both trembling. Are you sure?" he whispered. She answered him by unbuttoning his rough wool shirt. Her fingers were slow, deliberate. She wasn't fumbling. She was claiming. She pushed the shirt open. She laid her palm flat on his chest, over the old, puckered bullet scar. She felt his heart racing beneath her hand. He let out a shaky breath. His own hands, calloused and rough, came up. He touched her hair, the short, jaw-length hair she had cut. He cupped the back of her head. He kissed her, and this kiss was different. It was deep. It was a promise. He helped her with the buttons of her own dress. His hands were shaking so hard, he could barely do it. When she was in her simple shift, she stopped him. She stood up, and she turned her back to him. It was the bravest thing he had ever seen. She was standing in the firelight, her back to him. She was showing him the mark. She was trusting him. He stood up behind her. He saw it, the twisted, ugly, raised flesh of Bellamy's brand. It was a violation, a mark of pure evil. He felt a white-hot rage build in his chest, a hatred for Bellamy so strong it made him dizzy. He saw her shoulders tense. She was waiting for his disgust, waiting for his pity. He did not touch the brand. He put his hands on her shoulders, her other shoulder, the clean one. He kissed the back of her neck, just below her short chopped hair. He kissed the top of her spine. He felt a small sob break from her. "It's just me," he whispered against her skin. "It's just Elias." He slowly, so slowly, laid her down on the cot, her back still to him. He lay down behind her, his body curved around hers, a shield. And then his fingers, trembling, reached out in the firelight. He traced the line of her spine, and he found it, the raised, puckered, terrible scar. She inhaled, a sharp, ragged gasp. "Shh," he whispered. I'm just looking. I'm just seeing." He traced the entire twisted shape, from one end to the other. He wasn't exploring. He was learning it. He was taking its power away. He was making it his, not Bellamy's. And then he leaned down, and he kissed it. He pressed his lips, gently, to the center of the brand, to the heart of her shame. The sound that ripped out of Rosa was not a cry of pain. It was release, a dam breaking, the poison of 3 years flooding out. He held her, his arms wrapped around her. As she wept, he held her until she was quiet. Then, gently, he turned her over. He looked into her eyes. They were bright, clear, and full of him. He wiped the tears from her cheeks with his thumbs, and he made love to her. It was gentle. It was wordless. It was slow. It was not a taking. It was a finding. A quiet, desperate, beautiful finding. It was a shelter from the storm. For 2 weeks, the high mountain ranch was the only world that existed. It was a stolen piece of time, a fragile, healing piece. They worked together, they ate together, they slept together, in his cot by the fire. Rosa began to laugh. Small, rusty sounds at first, when he dropped a piece of wood on his foot, or when Jed, the mule, refused to move. Elias, he began to smile. It was a stiff, strange movement on his scarred face, but it reached his eyes. The world, however, does not forget. Down in the valley, in the muddy, raucous town of Cimarron, Bellamy's men had arrived. Silas Croft, the tracker, was smart. He'd been asking questions for a week. He found the railroad foreman. He found the trader who had sold Elias his flour. And he found Marshal Guthrie. Guthrie was a man who believed in the law, as long as the law paid. Croft, Guthrie, and 2 other hired guns sat in the marshal's office, drinking his whiskey. $100, Croft said, sliding the poster across the desk. From Mr. Bellamy, and a $50 bonus. From me, for your cooperation. We believe she's up in the high country. Guthrie looked at the poster. Insane, huh? And a half-breed. He shrugged. High country's rough. Could be dead. She ain't dead, Croft said. A trapper I talked to, he said there's a man up there. A recluse. Lives in the high canyon. Scarred up fella. Name of Ward. Elias Ward, Guthrie said, nodding. Yeah, I know of him. Comes down maybe once a year, trades pelts, keeps to himself. You think he's got her? He was at the trading post the same day I put that poster up, Croft said, his eyes cold. He left in a hurry, headed straight up the mountain. I think he found her, and I think he's keeping her. Maybe for himself, maybe for the reward. So, what's the play? Guthrie asked, leaning back. We ride up, Croft said. Tomorrow, you, me, my boys. We go ask Mr. Ward if he's seen her, as an officer of the law. And if he has, Croft smiled, a thin, ugly expression. Well, we bring her in, and we bring him in, for harboring a fugitive. Word spread. The barmaid who brought the whiskey heard it. The stable boy who would ready the horses heard it. Word spread. In whispers. Through Cimarron. They're going up the mountain, hunting that half-breed slave wife of Bellamy's. Up on the mountain, the peace was holding. It was a bright, clear morning. Rosa was outside. She had strung a line between the cabin and a pine tree. She was hanging their laundry. His shirts, her shift. It was such a normal thing to do. It made her heart ache with a strange, simple joy. Elias was in the barn, sharpening an axe. She pinned his shirt to the line, and she looked out over the valley. Her eyes, the eyes of a hunter's daughter, were sharp. She saw the town, a tiny cluster of blocks, miles away. And she saw something else, a thin gray column of smoke. It wasn't from the town. It was to the southeast, miles away, but too close. It was on this side of the river. It was on his land. She dropped the wet shirt. She ran. Elias. He came out of the barn, the axe in his hand. What is it? She pointed. Smoke, look. He climbed onto the top rail of the corral, his eyes straining. He was silent for a long, long time. His body went hard. What is it? She asked, her voice sinking. Elias, what? The south pasture, he said, his voice flat, deadly. The old line shack. I left half a sack of beans there. An animal? She started. No, he said, not an animal. They found my old fence line. They're hunting us. They're on my land. The peace shattered. The world came rushing back in. How long? She whispered. They're miles off, he said, jumping down. He was already moving, his mind working.
They're on foot or leading their horses. Rough country. But they'll find this place. By tomorrow. Maybe sooner. He looked at her. The ranch, it ain't safe. Not anymore. They were in the cabin. He had barred the door. The place felt like a trap again. Elias wasn't scared. He was cold. The soldier had returned. He was at his chest, pulling out boxes of cartridges, the big .50 caliber for the sharps. "Pack," he said. "What?" "Pack, food, all the jerky, your warm clothes." He wasn't looking at her. He was loading the rifle. "Elias, what are you doing?" "I'm taking you north," he said. His voice clipped. "Tonight, soon as it's dark, I can get you to the Ute Pass. From there, you follow the creek. It'll take you over the border into Colorado. You can get to Trinidad, find work, lose yourself." She stood in the middle of the room, her hands cold. "Get me? What about you?" "I'm staying," he said. "Staying?" she whispered. To fight them?" "To stall them," he corrected, finally looking at her. His face was hard. "This is my land. I know every rock, every shadow. I can lead 'em on a chase for a week. By the time they figure it out, you'll be gone. They'll never find you." She stared at him. He was doing it again. He was going to stand between her and the world. He was planning to die. For her. "No," she said. "It ain't a request," he growled. "It's the only way. You ain't safe here. I ain't safe. If they find me with you, you gotta go." "No." She said it louder. She walked over to him, put her hand on the rifle he was holding. "I said, no." "Rosa, damn it, don't argue with me. We ain't got time." "I am not running," she said, her voice shaking, but full of steel. "I ran once. I ran from him. I ran from everything. I burned his bed. Elias, but I left him alive. I left him to hunt me. I left him to send these men." She looked him square in the eye. "This time I won't leave someone behind. I won't run. I won't leave you." He stared at her, stunned. "It's my fight too," she said, her voice dropping, fierce. "He's hunting me. I am not a mule for you to lead north. I am not property for you to protect. I am a person, and we stay together." He looked at her for a long time, at the woman who had survived a brand, a blizzard, and his own broken mind. She wasn't leaving. He let out a long, shaky breath. "Damn you, woman! You're gonna get us both killed." "Then we die," she said, her chin high. "But we die here, together." He nodded, a single, sharp nod. The decision was made. "All right, together." His mind shifted. "But not here. This cabin, it's a trap. Box Canyon. They'll just pin us. We gotta go to them." "Go to them? To the town?" "It's the only way," Elias said, his mind racing, the old soldier taking over. "We can't fight 'em. Not Croft and his men. They're guns. But they're in town. With that crooked marshal. They're using the law. So we use it too." "The law?" Rosa said, her voice hollow. "Elias, the law wants me." "Bellamy's law wants you," he said. We go to Cimarron. We demand a hearing. We tell the truth. In public, Bellamy, he's powerful. But he's powerful in the dark. We bring it all of it into the light." It was the most terrifying gamble of her life. But she looked at him, and she nodded, in the light. "We ride tonight," he said. "We'll be there by morning." The preparation began. It was fast, grim. Elias went back to his chest. He dug under his old discharge papers. He pulled out another rifle, a Spencer repeater. "My old service rifle. It's lighter, faster." He checked the action. He handed it to her. "You know how to shoot," he said. "This is what you'll use." He strapped his own pistol belt on. He went to his drawer and pulled out a small .32 caliber revolver. "It ain't much," he said, but it'll stop a man up close. Keep it hidden, on you.
Rosa looked at the rifle. She looked at herself, in her simple dress. "They'll see me," she whispered.
They'll see the insane wife. They'll see the half-breed."
She stood very still. Then she nodded. A sharp, cold motion. She had a plan. She walked to the table and picked up his heavy hunting knife. She walked to the small, cracked piece of mirror hanging by the door.
"Rosa, what?"
She grabbed her own hair. The long, dark hair that Bellamy had loved. The hair he had twisted in his fist. And with a sawing, desperate motion, she began to cut it, hacking it off at the jawline. Thick, black strands fell to the floor. She was breathing hard, her eyes wide. It was another brand, undone. She turned to him. Her face was sharp, angular. Her green eyes blazed in the dim light. "Good." She went to his chest of clothes. She pulled out his spare set. A man's wool shirt, canvas trousers. She dropped her dress to the floor and pulled them on. They were huge, but she used a piece of rope to belt the trousers tight. She tucked her short, shorn hair under his spare hat. She strapped the small pistol on, over the shirt. She shouldered the Spencer rifle. She was not Rosa Maria Bellamy. She was not the victim from the river. She was a soldier. Elias just watched her, his heart full to breaking. It was full dark. The horses were saddled. Jed, the mule, was packed with their last provisions. The cabin was dark. They were ready. They stood by the door. This was it. They were riding into the lion's mouth. They probably wouldn't come back.
"Rosa,"
Elias said, his voice rough. You don't have to do this. I can still—" She turned to him in the dark. She put her hand on his chest. She could feel his heart hammering. "You asked me once," she whispered, "if I was trying to kill myself. When I ran into the ravine." "I remember," he said. I think maybe I was," she said, her voice full of a strange, quiet discovery. "I think I've been trying to die since the day he branded me. Running into the river, starving myself in your room, running into the snow. I thought I was nothing but his marked property, something stolen." She looked up at him, her eyes shining in the sliver of moonlight from the window. You didn't steal me, Elias," she whispered. "You didn't save me." He could feel her breath. "You gave me back to myself." Elias Ward, the man of stone, closed his eyes. He couldn't speak. He just took her hand, the one on his chest, and squeezed it. "Let's ride," she said. He opened the door. Together, they stepped out into the night. The ride down from the high country was a descent into hell. They rode all night, the trail a treacherous, moon-slicked ribbon of mud and rock. They didn't speak. The only sounds were the clatter of hooves, the suck and pull of the mud, and the sharp, cold wind that whistled through the pinon pines. Rosa rode the roan, Elias's best horse. He had put her on it, his face grim. "He's fast. If it goes bad, you don't stop. You ride through them." He rode the mule. Jed, his Longsharp's rifle resting across the pommel. Rosa had the lighter Spencer repeater thumping against her back, the small pistol a cold, heavy weight tucked into the rope belt of her trousers. She was not Rosa. She was someone else, a person with short hair, a man's hat, and a cold, hard knot of terror in her stomach. She was riding to the fire, not from it. And Elias was beside her. He was limping already, the long ride jarring his old wounds, but his face was a mask of cold iron. The soldier was back, and he was heading into battle. Cimarron appeared as a gray smudge in the pre-dawn light. It was a rough town, a collection of false front saloons, cheap hotels, and muddy corrals, all huddled around the railroad tracks and the land office. It smelled of coal smoke, manure, and stale whiskey. They didn't stop. They didn't hesitate. They rode straight down the main street, their hooves making a dull, sloppy sound in the thick mud. A few early risers, a drunk being thrown out of a saloon. A baker firing his oven stopped to stare at the strange pair, the scarred mountain man and the boy, the small, fierce-looking youth with the rifle. They stopped in front of the one building with a painted sign, Marshal Guthrie, U.S. Law. Elias dismounted, his movements stiff. He did not tie the mule. He just left it. He turned and helped Rosa down. It was the first time he had touched her since the barn. His hand was a rock. "Stay close," he muttered. "Let me talk first." He thumped on the door. A light was on inside. They heard a chair scrape.
"It's 6 in the morning! Go sleep it off!"
A rough voice yelled.
"Marshal Guthrie!"
Elias's voice was a roar, a parade ground bark that cut through the wood.
"Open this door. It's official business."
There was a silence, the scraping of a lock. The door opened a crack. Marshal Guthrie stood there, his suspenders down, his hair a mess. He was holding a shotgun. He squinted into the gray light.
"Ward,"
he said, his voice thick with sleep and confusion.
"Elias Ward. What in the blue blazes?"
His eyes flicked to Rosa, standing in Ellis's shadow. "Who's the boy?" Elias pushed the door open, forcing Guthrie to step back. They walked into the small, hot office. It was filthy, smelling of stale cigar smoke and spilled whiskey.
"He ain't a boy,"
Elias said, shoving his hat back. Rosa, her heart hammering against her ribs so hard she thought she would be sick, reached up and pulled off her own hat. Her short, hacked-off hair fell around her face. Guthrie's jaw dropped. He stared. He looked at the trousers, the rifle, the face. He recognized it. From the poster. I'll be damned," he whispered. He put the shotgun down, his eyes narrowing. He was awake now. You're the one, the half-breed, Bellamy's wife." "My name," Rosa said, her voice shaking but clear, "is Rosa Maria Sandoval." "She's here," Elias said, his voice flat, "to demand a hearing and to claim sanctuary." Guthrie's eyes flicked from Rosa to Elias, then to the $50 bonus he had been promised. This was bad. They hadn't run. They had walked right in. He couldn't just shoot them. Not here. A hearing? He stammered, trying to buy time. "What kind of hearing? There's a warrant for her. Woman. For theft. For attempted murder. You're under arrest." He reached for his pistol. "Touch it, and you're a dead man," Elias said. His voice was soft. He hadn't moved. He hadn't reached for his own gun. But the cold, hard certainty in his voice made Guthrie's hand freeze. "This is my office. Ward," Guthrie blustered. "And this is your town," Elias said. "That warrant, it's a lie. Signed by a bought judge. She's here to tell the truth. In public. In front of a real judge. You're the law, ain't you? Or are you just Bellamy's hired man?" Guthrie turned red. You can't come in here and—" "We are," Elias said. "There's a justice of the peace in this town, a man named Slocum. We want him. We want a public hearing. Now. You can do it, or we can walk out to that street and tell every man in this town that the marshal is on Lawrence Bellamy's payroll." Guthrie was trapped. He looked at Rosa, her face pale but set. He looked at Elias, a man who clearly had nothing left to lose. If this went public, if he was seen as a coward, or worse, corrupt, he'd be finished. "All right," he spat, grabbing his hat and his gun belt. "All right, you want Slocum? You'll get him. You want a hearing? You'll get it." He grinned, a thin, ugly smile. "You're gonna regret this, both of you." He strapped on his belt. "You stay put. Don't move. I'll get the judge. We'll use the land office. It's the biggest room." He left, slamming the door, leaving them alone. He's buying time," Rosa whispered, her hands shaking so bad she had to grip her rifle. "He's gonna send a wire to Bellamy." "I know," Elias said. "I'm counting on it. I want Bellamy here. This only ends with him." The land office was a long, cold room, smelling of paper and pipe smoke. By the time Marshal Guthrie returned with Judge Slocum, the sun was up, and the town was stirring.
Word had spread. The mountain man, the crazy half-breed girl, in the land office. Guthrie's got him.
Men began to gather. Ranch hands, shopkeepers, railroad men. They crowded into the back of the room, their faces curious, hostile. They were here for the show. Judge Slocum was a thin, old man with spectacles and a clean-shaven, disapproving face. He looked like he'd rather be anywhere else.
"Marshal, what is the meaning of this?"
Slocum said, arranging his papers on a heavy oak desk.
"This is highly irregular."
"This is Elias Ward, Your Honor," Guthrie said, his voice full of false authority.
"And this is Rosa Bellamy, the woman on the poster."
A murmur went through the crowd.
Bellamy's wife? That's her? Looks like a damn boy.
Slocum put on his spectacles. He looked at Rosa. "Ma'am or miss, you are the subject of a warrant. I have seen it. You are accused of grievous crimes."
"They are lies,"
Elias said, his voice echoing in the room. "All of it. We are here to tell the truth, and we ask for this to be heard."
"Very well,"
Slocum said. Sighing, he looked at the hostile, packed room. "This is not a trial. It is an inquiry, a pre-trial hearing, you might say." Just as he spoke, there was a commotion outside, the sound of a heavy coach, of horses blowing, of a man's voice booming.
"Where is she? Where is my wife? Guthrie, get me my wife."
The crowd at the back parted. Lawrence Bellamy stood in the doorway. He was exactly as Rosa remembered, polished, perfect. He wore a black broadcloth suit, a silver brocade vest, and a string tie. His boots were polished to a mirror's shine. He smelled of bay rum and expensive cigars. His handsome, clean-shaven face was a mask of concern.
"Oh, thank God,"
he said, striding into the room. He didn't look at the judge. He looked at Rosa. "Rosa, my darling, what has he done to you?" He acted as if he were seeing her for the first time. "Your hair, your clothes, my poor sick girl. It's all right. I am here. I will take you home." He moved to take her arm. Elias stepped in front of her, a scarred, dirty wall of buffalo hide and wool. Bellamy stopped. His eyes, cold and blue, raked over Elias. The false concern vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp contempt.
"You!"
he spat.
"Captain,"
Elias said, his voice a low growl. "So this is the one," Bellamy said, turning to the judge, to the crowd. He was performing. "This is the man who kidnapped my poor, unstable wife. I should have known."
"This is not a kidnapping, Mr. Bellamy,"
Judge Slocum said, tapping his desk.
"I am trying to conduct—" "You know who this man is?"
Bellamy shouted, pointing a manicured finger at Elias.
This is Elias Ward, a deserter, a coward who ran from his post, a man with blood on his hands, who turned tail and left his brothers to die. And this is the man you're listening to, a man who clearly—"
He looked at Rosa. "A man who has preyed upon a sick, confused woman. He has filled her head with lies. He stole her. And he probably stole my money, too." The crowd murmured. This made sense. The crazy deserter, the sick woman, the respectable, worried husband.
"I am not sick,"
Rosa said. Her voice, though quiet, cut through the room. Bellamy turned to her, his face a mask of pity. "Rosa, my love, it is all right. The sickness, it makes you say these things. We will get you a doctor. We will get you back to the sanitarium."
"I have never seen a sanitarium,"
Rosa said, her voice growing stronger. She stepped out from behind Elias. She stood in the middle of the room, in her man's clothes, her short hair, her green eyes blazing. "I am not sick. I am not insane." The crowd stared. She was beautiful, in a wild, strange way.
"Mr. Bellamy,"
she said, her voice shaking,
"is a liar."
The room gasped. "Rosa," Bellamy warned, his voice low.
He says I tried to kill him,
Rosa continued, looking at the judge, at the crowd.
He says I stole his money.
"Which you did," Bellamy shouted.
I took my mother's shawl, Rosa said, and a necklace he had given me, a pearl necklace. I left it at a trading post to pay for a mule. I stole nothing."
"Lies," Bellamy said.
"She set fire to my home, to my bed."
"Yes," Rosa said, her voice clear. The crowd went silent.
"Yes,"
she said again.
I did set that fire. After 3 years. After he treated me not like a wife, not like a person. He beat me."
Bellamy laughed. A short, ugly bark.
"Absurd. She fell. She was clumsy. Prone to fits."
"He beat me," Rosa repeated. When I spoke Spanish. When I did not please him. He locked me in my room for days. He called me his half-breed mare, his property."
The crowd was shifting. Some of the men looked uncomfortable. The women at the back, they were listening.
"And when I tried to leave him,"
Rosa's voice dropped, trembling.
The last time, he caught me. He said property that runs needs to be marked, so everyone will know who it belongs to.
This is slander," Bellamy roared,
his face turning red.
She is mad. Judge, stop this."
"Let her speak," Judge Slocum said, his own face pale. Rosa looked at the crowd. Her eyes were full of tears, but she would not let them fall. His men, they held me down, in his forge, and he did this." She turned her back to the room. Her hands were shaking so hard, she could not work the buttons. Elias stepped forward. His face was a mask of cold fury. He didn't look at anyone. He just gently undid the top 2 buttons of her wool shirt. Rosa took a breath. She gripped the fabric, and she pulled it aside, exposing her left shoulder. The room was silent. In the morning light, streaming through the dirty window, the brand was a puckered, violent, ugly thing, a twisted, ornate bee. It was not a scar from a fall. It was exactly what she said it was. A woman at the back of the room let out a choked, half-sob.
"Madre de Dios."
The scoffing had stopped. The men, they were looking at Bellamy. Their faces were no longer curious. They were hard.
She did it to herself,"
Bellamy stammered, his polish gone, his voice suddenly shrill.
She's insane. She did it with a poker to frame me."
"That ain't no poker, Mark," a voice grunted from the back. That's a brand."
"And he ain't no coward,"
another voice said.
A man, thin, in a dusty coat, pushed his way forward. He was missing an arm. I served with Captain Bellamy, and I served with Sergeant Ward."
Elias looked at the man. He recognized him.
Corporal Evans, from his own company.
"Ward, he didn't run,"
Evans said, his voice shaking. He was terrified, but he was speaking.
He took a saber to the face and a bullet in the side trying to stop what was happening. He gave the order."
Evans pointed a trembling finger at Bellamy.
He ordered us to fire on that village, on women, on children. Ward tried to stop it. He was the only one."
The room was turning. It was becoming a mob, and it was not on Bellamy's side.
"Judge,"
Elias said, his voice cracking. He was shaking. He had been seen. He had been absolved.
"Judge,"
Elias said, stepping forward.
He's right. I did run. I ran after. I couldn't live with what I'd done, what he made us do."
He looked at Bellamy, his scarred face full of a decade of shame and rage.
He is a monster. He was a monster then, and he is a monster now. He marks what he thinks he owns. He marked them with fire, and he marked her with iron."
"Lies!"
Bellamy screamed. His face was purple. His control was shattered. He was not a polished gentleman.
He was an animal. You slut! You marked thing!
He lunged for her. His hands were claws, reaching for her throat, for her face. It was over in a second. Elias moved, shoving Rosa behind him, his bad leg twisting, but Marshal Guthrie saw it all. He saw the brand, he heard the soldier, he saw the $100 reward and the $50 bonus evaporate. He saw the noose. If he sided with this man. Guthrie moved. He brought the barrel of his shotgun up, not to shoot, but as a club. He slammed it into Bellamy's chest. "That's enough, Mr. Bellamy." Guthrie growled. Bellamy hit the floor, gasping. The wind knocked out of him. 2 other men from the crowd surged forward, grabbing his arms, pinning him. The animal was caged. Marshal, subdue that man," Judge Slocum said, his own voice trembling. He pushed his spectacles back up. He was pale, but his voice was cold, hard. He looked at Bellamy, who was being held on the floor, his fine suit covered in mud and spit. "Mr. Bellamy," the judge said, This is a terrible thing, a most terrible thing. This warrant, it is suspect. You claim this woman is your wife. You claim she is your property." "She is," Bellamy shrieked from the floor. "Then you will provide the marriage contract." Judge Slocum said, the legal document, the one registered here, in the territory of New Mexico, as is required by law. Bellamy froze. His eyes went wide. The contract, Mr. Bellamy," the judge insisted. It's in Santa Fe," Bellamy stammered. We were married by a priest. Was it filed with the territorial court?" Slocum pressed. "Was it legally registered, Mr. Bellamy?" Bellamy had no answer, because there was no contract. There was only a purchase, an arrangement, with her mother. He had never bothered with the law. He was the law. I see," Slocum said. He took off his spectacles. He rubbed his eyes. I see. Then, by the law of this territory, this woman, Rosa Maria Sandoval, is not your wife. She has never been your wife. She is a free citizen." He looked at Guthrie. "This warrant is void. Mr. Bellamy is to be released, and he is to be on the 4 o'clock stagecoach out of this town. And if he is ever seen in this county or near Miss Sandoval again, he will be arrested for assault, for." He looked at the brand, which Elias was gently covering, buttoning her shirt. For aggravated mayhem." He slammed his hand on the desk. This hearing is over." It was done. Elias took her hand. "Come on." The crowd, they didn't move. They just parted. They made a path. They looked at her, this small woman in a man's clothes. They looked at her and they were silent. Elias opened the door. "The sun, it was blinding. It was so bright. It hurt her eyes." She stepped out onto the muddy street. She was free. She had won. She stood there, in the middle of the street, the rifle still in her hand. She didn't know what to do. The adrenaline, it was gone. She was just empty, shaking. Elias came and stood beside her. He was limping badly now. He looked at her. She looked at her own hands. Free. Slowly, her hand, the one that wasn't holding the rifle, found his big, calloused, scarred hand. She slid her fingers into his. He squeezed, gently. She looked up at him, at his scarred face, his kind, tired eye. He had stood with her. He had confessed his own sins for her. "Elias," she whispered, her voice barely a sound in the sudden, quiet street. "I'm here," he said. She looked down at their joined hands. You still sure?" He looked confused. "Sure? About what?" You heard all of it?" she whispered, the tears finally coming, the tears of release. "The fire, the rage, the truth. You still sure you want someone like me?" Elias Ward looked at her, standing there in the muddy street, her small hand lost in his. The sun was warm on his scarred face. He felt he did not know what he felt. He just knew he was tired, bone-tired, but he was not empty. He gave her hand a squeeze. "Someone like you?" he said, his voice a low, rough gravel. "Rosa, you're the only someone I want." He let go of her hand, just for a second. He put his arm, his good, strong arm, around her shoulders. She was trembling, the fight and the victory draining out of her, leaving her hollow. He felt her lean against him, her head resting just below his shoulder. "Let's go home," he said. They got the horses. They bought flour and beans and coffee and 2 new axes. They paid with the last of the pelt money Elias had saved. They didn't have much, just themselves. Marshal Guthrie watched them ride out. The one-armed soldier, Evans, was standing on the boardwalk. He raised his one good hand. Elias raised his in return. The ride back up the mountain was a different kind of journey. It was not a flight. It was not a march to war. It was just a ride home. Elias was in agony. The fight, the lunge at Bellamy, had twisted his bad leg. The one with the old bullet scar. The ride down had been bad. The ride up it was a quiet, private hell. He set his jaw, his face pale beneath the tan and the scar. But he did not make a sound. Rosa watched him. She saw the way he held himself stiff in the saddle. She saw the white-knuckled grip on his reins. She saw the price. They smelled the ranch before they saw it. The smell of ash, cold, wet ash. They came over the last rise, into the canyon that had been their fortress. It was gone. The cabin was still there. The heavy log walls had stood. But the barn was a smoking, black skeleton. The corral fence was smashed. The line shack they had seen smoking that had just been the start. Croft's men, furious at finding their quarry gone, had come up here anyway. They had come for the bounty, and when they found nothing, they had taken their payment in destruction. Elias Rosa whispered, sliding off the roan. The cattle, the small herd he had worked 10 years to build, were gone, driven off. The other horses, the ones they had left behind, were gone. Elias sat on the mule. Jed, and he just looked. He looked at the ruin of his life's work. 10 years of solitude and sweat, trying to build something clean, gone in an afternoon of spite. He slid off the mule, his bad leg giving way. He crumpled to his knees in the mud. He didn't make a sound. He just put his hands on the wet, black earth. He was defeated. Rosa stood there. She looked at the burned barn. She looked at the empty corral. And she looked at this man, kneeling. His shoulders bowed. He had faced down Bellamy. He had faced down his own past. He had faced down a room full of hostile men. But this emptiness, this broke him. She walked over to him. She did not kneel. She stood beside him. She put her hand on his shoulder. They didn't get the land, she said. Her voice was quiet. He looked up at her, his face hollow. Rosa, it's all gone. I got nothing to offer, nothing to... You got the land, she said, her voice fierce now. They burned the wood, they stole the animals, but they didn't take the mountain. They didn't take the water, and they didn't take us. He looked at her, her short, hacked-off hair, her green, blazing eyes. We ain't got an axe, he whispered, his voice broken. She walked back to Jed. She unstrapped one of the new axes they had bought in town. She walked back and held it out to him. We do now, she said. We got 2, and we got flour, and we got time. It's spring. Elias, things grow in the spring. He looked at the axe. He looked at her. He took it. His hand closed around the smooth, new wood. He used it to pull himself up. He was unsteady on his bad leg, but he was standing. The cabin, he said, his voice thick. We'll sleep in the cabin, she said. Tomorrow, we build. And they did. Rebuilding was not a fast or easy thing. It was a war, fought one day at a time against the mountain and their own exhaustion. The spring was a time of hard, aching labor. Elias's leg was bad. He could not walk far, and he could not lift the heavy loads he used to. The limp was permanent. It was the last mark Bellamy had left on their lives.
So Elias, he became the architect. He sat on a stump, his leg propped up, the new axe in his hands. He couldn't go to the trees. So he taught Rosa.
"No," he'd call out, his voice hoarse. "Not that one. The one next to it. The tall pine. See how it leans? It'll fall clean. Notch it on the low side. Watch your back." And Rosa, wearing his old trousers and shirt, her muscles lean and hard, would swing the other axe. She learned to fell a tree. She learned to limb it. She learned the smell of fresh-cut pine. She would drag the logs back with a mule, her body screaming with the effort. And Elias, he would sit and he would work. He couldn't do the heavy lifting, so he did the fine work. He taught her how to split shakes for the new roof. He taught her how to hew a log, to make it sit flat. They worked from sunup to sundown. They did not talk much. They did not have the breath. They communicated in the thud of the axe, the hiss of the saw. They were partners, in the sweat, in the silence, in the dirt. At night, they would collapse into the cabin. They'd eat beans and corn pone, too tired to speak, and the new rituals began. The first ritual was the leg. Elias would sit by the fire, his face gray with pain. Rosa would heat water. She would kneel in front of him. She'd get the basin, and a clean rag, and the pine salve he made. She would roll up his trouser leg. The old wound was a puckered, angry knot, swollen and red. She would bathe it. Her hands were so gentle. He, who had flinched from her touch, now waited for it. He would rest his head back against the wall, his eyes closed, and just breathe as she washed away the sweat and the ache. She would talk to it, not to him, to the leg. "You're a good leg," she would whisper, her voice soft, her short hair falling forward. She'd rub the salve into the hot skin. You did well today. You held him up. You stood when he needed to stand. In that town." She would kiss the scar. "Thank you for standing. Thank you." Elias would sit there, his heart so full he thought it would burst. He had never, in his entire life, known a thing like this. The second ritual was the carving. After she had tended his leg, he would not rest. He would take out his knife, and he would take a piece of scrap wood, and he would carve. He carved a small, rough bird, a wren. He worked on it for a week. One night, he finished it. He rubbed it smooth with sand, and then with bear grease, until the wood shone in the firelight. He held it out to her. It's nothing," he mumbled. "Just wood." She took it. It was perfect. It was full of life. It fit in the palm of her hand. "Elias, it's beautiful." You should learn," he said, not looking at her. Your hands, they're good hands, strong, but they're quick. You'd be good at it." So he taught her. He gave her a smaller knife and a piece of soft pine. He taught her how to read the grain, how to make the cuts away from her body. She was clumsy at first. Her hands, strong from the axe, were too rough. She'd split the wood. She'd curse in Spanish. A long, quiet string of words that made him smile. "No," he'd say, his hand over hers, his thumb on her knuckle. "Slow. Let the knife do the work. You just guide it. See, you're not fighting the wood. You're finding what's inside it." She learned. She started to carve. A leaf, a flower, a small, sleeping fox. And the third ritual that was hers, and it was a secret. After Elias was asleep, his rough breathing filling the small cabin, she would move. She would slip from his cot. He'd given her his cot. He slept on a bedroll on the floor, near the fire. "My leg, it's better near the heat." He'd lied. She would go to her old room, The one that had been her prison. It was a storage room now. She'd light a single candle. She had found his old, ruined ledger, the one he kept his poor accounts in. Most of it was empty. She had a nub of a pencil, and she began to write. She sat on the floor, the ledger in her lap, and she wrote. She wrote about her mother. She wrote about the feel of adobe. She wrote about Bellamy. She wrote about the brand. She wrote about the fire. She wrote about the cold river. And she wrote about the scarred man. She was not writing a book. She was letting the poison out. She was telling the truth, just to the page. She was marking her own history. When she was done, she would hide the ledger. Not under her pillow, under a loose floorboard in the corner. It was hers. It was the one part of her that was just for her. Spring turned to summer. The new barn was up. It was rough. It was ugly, but it was strong. It was theirs. They had no cattle to put in it, just Jed and the roan, and a few chickens she had bought. One afternoon, she was walking by the corral. She saw something in the mud, a piece of dark, rotted cloth. It was her shawl, the one Elias had dropped in the mud that night of the storm. She pulled it out. It was ruined, caked with filth, torn. It smelled of the earth. She looked at it. It was the last piece of that old life, the thing she had used to hide the brand. She took it not to the cabin. She took it to the small meadow, above the cabin, where the wildflowers were starting to bloom. The columbine, the paintbrush. She got a small trowel, and she dug a hole, a deep one. She folded the shawl, gently, and she laid it in the earth. She buried it. She buried Rosa Maria Bellamy. She did not say a prayer. She stood there, and she felt light. She went, and she gathered seeds from the other wildflowers, and she planted them on top of the grave of her shawl. She planted new life over the old pain. The summer was hot and good. The garden she had planted, it grew. Squash and beans and corn. They had food. They were happy. It was a quiet, tired, aching happiness, but it was real. They had to go to town. We need salt," Elias said, "and in cartridges. Winter's comin'." "I will come," she said. The ride to town was different. She did not dress as a man. She had sewn a new dress from 2 of Elias's old flour sacks. It was plain, but it was clean. Her hair was longer now. It curled around her ears. He rode the mule. She rode the roan. They rode side by side. When they entered Cimarron, the town stopped. People stared. Some men friends of Bellamy's. Men who had lost money when he fled, they glared. They spat tobacco juice as she rode by. "There's that crazy bruja," one muttered. Rosa, she just looked ahead. But others they watched. The women, they came to their doors. They looked at her short hair, at her flour-sack dress, at the scarred man beside her. They didn't glare. They nodded. A small, slow sign of respect. Marshal Guthrie was on the boardwalk. He looked at Elias's new, pronounced limp. He looked at Rosa. He touched the brim of his hat. "Ward, ma'am." "Marshal," Elias said. "They bought their salt. They bought their cartridges. They were just people. Buying supplies." As they were leaving, the one-armed soldier, Evans, was waiting for them. "Sergeant," he said to Elias. He looked at Rosa. "Ma'am, I'm glad to see you looking well." "Thank you, Mr. Evans," Rosa said. She smiled at him. I wanted to give you this," Evans said. He fumbled in his one good pocket. He pulled out a small, carved piece of wood. It was a bluebird. Rough. Not as good as Elias's. I been learning," he stammered, blushing. "Just for you, for what you did, for speaking up. You gave me my voice back, too." Rosa's eyes filled with tears. She took the bird.
"Thank you," she whispered. I will treasure it."
They rode home. That night the work was done. The new barn was full of hay they had cut from the high meadow. The pantry was full of squash and dried beans. The smell of winter was in the air, a clean, sharp edge. They sat outside, not on a bench. They sat on the ground, their backs against the new-felled logs of the barn they had built. The sky, it was a black velvet cloth, poked with a billion holes. The stars, they were so bright, you felt like you could fall right into them. It was quiet, the good, deep quiet of the mountains. Elias had his arm around her. She was curled into his chest, her head resting on his good shoulder. His bad leg was propped up on a stone. She was holding the little bluebird Evans had given her.
He said I gave him his voice,"
she whispered, her voice full of wonder.
"You did,"
Elias said, his voice a low rumble in her ear.
You gave me mine."
She was quiet for a long time. She looked up at the spill of stars. She thought about the brand, the scar. It was still there. It would always be there. A puckered, ugly mark on her skin. But it didn't hurt. Not anymore. It was just a mark. It was paper. It was an old story. She was writing the new story. She reached up and she touched his scar, the one on his face. She traced it from his temple to his beard.
"The world marked me once,"
she whispered. Her voice was strong, clear. It marked you too. It put its stamp on us. It tried to tell us what we were. He held her tighter.
"But now,"
she said, and she turned, pressing her face into his shirt, her arms wrapping around his waist.
"Now I mark this, us, here, on this mountain."
She held on, as if she could imprint herself on him. "I mark this forever." Elias Ward closed his eyes. He felt the warmth of her. He felt the strength in her arms. He felt whole. The scar on his face, the ache in his leg, the ghosts in his head, they were all quiet. He kissed the top of her short, soft hair. "Ain't no mark deeper than love," he whispered. "Thank you so much for pulling up a log and listening to our story tonight. We'd sure love to hear your thoughts. And tell us where you're listening from so we can all connect. Be sure to subscribe to the Wild West Campfire channel and let us know what you thought of Rosa and Elias's journey.